So let's get started with L2. Like I said, this was one of the fan favorites from the roll review videos. It's got a really nice luster quality to it, and I think the surfaces really do it justice. Um, I mean, it's hard to find any real flaws with this coin, so I'm just going to kind of let it speak for itself. There are a couple of minor abrasions on the cheek, but nothing really serious. Now, the reverse, again, beautiful cartwheel luster, a nice strike, and again, you can see why this was one of the fan favorites. All right, let's bring her over here and let's get a little better view of what we're working with here. All right, so we do have a couple of minor dings on the neck there. Couple of minor hits to the cheek, but overall, nothing terribly serious and nothing really concentrated in any one area. I think this one is definitely one we may have to consider submitting, because as I look through the fields, I'm really not seeing anything that would disqualify it. Again, a couple of minor marks right there, but not anything horrific. A decent enough strike. And the only real question is whether or not those marks on the face would limit the grade to something below mint state 63. Because honestly, otherwise, I think this one may have to go in for submission, or at least consideration for submission, because we've got to run the math. We've got to run the expected grade, factor in the cost of grading, and then determine whether or not it's worth that additional expense for the potential premium it might bring. But I have to say, overall, this is a pretty decent looking coin with no real disqualifying marks that I'm seeing. That is L2. And we're going to keep that one as a definite consideration for possible submission. All right, let's move on to the next coin. This is from the standard roll. This is S3, an 1899 New Orleans. This 1899 O, like I say, has some real nice luster pattern to it. Couple of marks. But for New Orleans, it looks like we've got a relatively decent strike. Not pancake, not fully developed, kind of somewhere in between, which is very, very typical for a New Orleans Morgan. Let's take a look at the other side. So again, I mean, we're looking at really nice luster and a pretty decent looking surface on the reverse. All right, let's put her on the other scope. All right, now this is where I think the issue is going to come in. because when you look at the face and the cheek, you're gonna see a little bit of chatter and some marks that I think might get to the point where they would limit the grade on this. You got a nice little smudge out there. You've got some rub marks on the chin and the jaw. You've got some indentations. Not the best strike in the world, but also not the worst. But then you've got some noise up here in the field as well. The reverse, though, I think is a little bit better. Again, you've got a really nice surface texture. And I'm not really seeing too much that is discouraging or disqualifying on the reverse, especially for a New Orleans. You can actually get in close and see most of the detail on the eagle's talons. You've got a reasonable breast feather strike. And again, nothing really disqualifying on the surface. But coming back to the obverse, I think this more than anything right here, the number of marks and abrasions, the the density, I think. Yes, Edwin, she's got whiskers. I think this one probably is not going to be worthy of submission. So I think we're just going to have to put her in a separate pile. She is probably going to end up as inventory. Excuse me. Now, the next coin, I love this one. This may not be the highest grade coin we'll see today, but check this out. Look at the colors and the toning on this. Now, let me hit some more light on it so we can actually see and appreciate the toning and the luster on that. Look at that. That is an original mint surface because you're literally watching the luster pattern cartwheel underneath the color and the toning. And that tells you that it is still an original mint surface. All right, now look at that coloration. And more importantly, look at that luster pattern carry all the way through that toning. To me, that's a beautiful looking toner. And I think a reasonably high grade for a New Orleans. Now, on the reverse, I have to tone the lighting down because this one, this surface, this side is not really toned that much. So I think that's kind of an interesting coin all the way around. And I think this one might need to get submitted for potential consideration for grading, just because I think for an 85.0 with that kind of coloration on the obverse, In a slab, I think that's just going to be a nice little coin. And if it happens to grade fairly well, say 63, 64 for a New Orleans coin with toning, I think that might justify the premium. It might not, but we'll see how that goes. Like I say, I think this one is a coin that might deserve some additional consideration for submission to grading. So this is probably going to go in the pile with L2. What do you guys think? Let me know. I'm curious to know what you all think about these coins. Um, as much as you watch me go through the process, I'm definitely interested in your feedback and input. All right, now the best coin of the two rolls, in my opinion, is this gorgeous little 1879 New Orleans that came out of the limited roll. This is L7 from the limited roll. And I think you will understand why this is a favorite. Now, obviously, an 1879 O is a nice little coin. Okay. That is not a common date. That is, I wouldn't call it a key date, but definitely a semi key date. Not one you see every day. And a coin that I would say is, pretty desirable. Now, for a New Orleans mint coin, I'd have to concede that the strike on this one, probably average. Not a pancake, which is nice. Sometimes you see that really flat hairline that some people refer to as a pancake. And hang on a second. And in this case, that is not a pancake hairline. So I think this coin has a lot going for it for potential submission from that standpoint. I don't know. We'll have to take a closer look in a minute, but the reverse, again, not an outstanding strike. I mean, not a flat eagle's breast, but not well pronounced either. I'd say that's just an average strike for a New Orleans coin. But at the same time, relatively few, marks and abrasions. The surface luster looks beautiful. Clearly a mint state coin. The only question will be, what is an estimated grade on this bad boy? So let's put her on the other scope and get a better idea of just what we are dealing with. So we've got a few minor contact marks down here under the chin and by the star. There are a few abrasions on the cheek, but very light actually. As Morgans go, I'd have to say this one is relatively mark free. This is a pretty nice little Morgan dollar right here. Now you've got a couple of chatter marks there. A couple of minor hits there. Again, some minor noise out here in the field. Nothing too terrible at all. And again, the important area for New Orleans, that is a really nice strike. Now, again, I'm not going to say that that would be considered strong by any means, because I don't think it is. But as New Orleans dollars go, that is not a pancake strike by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm not seeing anything on the obverse of this coin that would prevent, even a 63, 64, possibly a 65. But what does the reverse show? Because this is going to make or break this coin. All right, now, right off the bat, we've got some hits and abrasions under the motto, above the eagle's head right there. I don't think that's going to be terrible from a grading perspective. It's not devastating, and it's not like a lot of marks in a short area or a small area. There are some abrasions. There are some little hairlines here and there. But look at that mint texture. That surface texture right there says everything. That is outstanding. I mean, that's what you're looking for from a mint surface right there. Solid mint mark. A couple of minor marks down there by the dollar and the rim. Now look at the talons on that eagle. And again, for New Orleans, that is pretty impressive. That is not a bad strike overall. And that's really about the worst of it on the reverse right there. So I have to say, overall, this one is a pretty darn nice looking coin. Now, given the impact on the reverse, I don't know. I might have to concede that this coin might max out at about a 63, maybe a 64. I don't know that they would give it a 65 with a mark that bad on the reverse. But at the same time, it's really not severe. And more importantly, it's about the only thing that the reverse has against it as a strike. Because even as you watch the light move around it, that's really not a grade ender as far as I'm concerned. I think that, this is going to be a tough one. I love the coin, and I love the fact that it's an 1879 O. So I have to say that that one is going to go for consideration.